It is my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker this evening. Ms. Winona LaDuke is an Anishinaabe woman, an internationally acclaimed author, orator, and activist. A graduate of Harvard and Antioch universities with advanced degrees in rural economic development, LaDuke has devoted her life to protecting the lands and lifeways of Native communities. LaDuke is a founder and co-director of Under the Earth, a national advocacy group encouraging public support and funding for Native environmental groups. With Honor the Earth, she works nationally and internationally on issues of climate change, renewable energy, sustainable development, food systems, and environmental justice. In her own community in northern Minnesota, she is the founder of the White Earth Land Recovery Project, one of the largest reservation-based nonprofit organizations in the country, and a leader on the issues of culturally based sustainable development strategies, renewable energy, and food systems. In this work, LaDuke also works to protect indigenous plants and heritage foods from patenting and genetic engineering. Recipient of many honors and recognitions, she served as Ralph Nader's vice presidential running mate on the Green Party ticket in the 1996 and 2000 presidential elections. Outspoken and unflaggingly dedicated to matters of ecological sustainability, Winona LaDuke is a powerful speaker who inspires her audiences to become active and engaged. Please join me in offering a warm welcome to Ms. Winona LaDuke, who will discuss with us the intersections of multiculturalism and sustainability.
You can see this is brought to you by Starbucks. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much for having me here. Ani nindoy maganaduk. Nigagoy gitmagas, bini sikwe to go makwando dem, kalba body cock, ish kaniganing in Jabavich. Forget the album, but I was saying pretty close. But I'm from the White Earth Reservation, which is in northern Minnesota. I'm Anishinaabe and Bear Clan. I'm very happy to be here today. I apologize, I got a little bit of a head cold, which you aren't going to all notice, except for I'm going to dive for the Kleenexes a couple times. Again, thanks for the honor of visiting with you today. As I reflected on what I wanted to talk with you about, I know what I was asked to talk about, and I'll get to that, but I want to say that in our teachings as Anishinaabe people, we have this teaching of renewable, which means the good life. Means the good life. That's what we strive to. And I think that in the essence of that, there's these tenets of sustainability. There's these teachings that if we want to, as Mike Wiggins from the Bad River Reservation in northern Wisconsin says, he said, he was testifying at these hearings on this mine, the GTAC mine up there, and he said, seems like people don't want to hang around another 1,000 years or so. Interesting thing to say. You know, the question is, do you want to hang around another 1,000 years? How are we going to do that? I'm going to suggest to you that it's possible that it would be a really good idea to get out of the box. That maybe the solution is, as my friend Jim Hightower says, if you start digging a hole and you keep digging, maybe you better just quit digging at a certain point. And it is possible that a different paradigm may be essential to sustainability. That a society which is based on empire, a society which is based on conquest, a society that consumes a third of the world's resources and requires basically 5 planets, probably is not a long-haul society. Might want to figure out how we're going to live. And so that is a little bit of the challenge that we all face. In our Anishinaabe teachings, we're told that this is the time of the 7th fire. And in that time, as Anishinaabe people, which, you know, I think most of you know is kind of an area, Anishinaabe King, in which we have come to live here. In our terms, that Anishinaabe King, that doesn't mean it means the land of the Ojibwe, but it means more the land to which the people belong. The land to which the people belong, not the concepts of private property, not all of that which is associated, but more the land to which the people belong. And in that, there are a number of teachings that we are given. The prophets that came to us a long time ago, they told us a lot of things. That's what prophets do, we hope. They told us what was going to happen to us as Anishinaabe people. They described things that we would do to ourselves and things that would happen. And I always say that because we Anishinaabe also have some stories where we botch things up. I just want to say that because nobody has a monopoly on botching things up. That's what we do because we're human. We botch things up. The question is if you've got the humility and the commitment, the wherewithal to fix it. And that's really kind of the challenge that we face. So in our teachings, they talked about some things that happened to us as people, talked about how some people would come and some would be good and some would not be so good, which is true. They talked about how we would be forced to move. Talked about how many of our people would disappear. We didn't have a word for smallpox in our language. But as you know, there's about a 95% of our people died from basically the initial weapons of mass destruction, which were smallpox. Intentional, They talked about how many of our things would disappear. And I don't think we had a word for anthropologists, but that must have been what they were talking about. When we were kind of hauled off and, whatever. No conceptual framework for a lot of the things. This isn't their prophecies, they're talking about this. Our people would kind of be asleep, which I think was kind of the boarding school era. This wasn't like Philip's Exeter. This is like when you send an entire nation off to school to be indoctrinated into someone else's worldview. That's what happened to our people as Anishinaabe people and most Indigenous people. And then they talked about how our people would become awake, and they would go and find their things. They would find their things, their languages, their drums, their Dewagan, their songs, their ceremonies, and their things, and they would bring them home. They talk kind of like that. And in that's called the time of the sixth fire, the time of the seventh fire, where that would come. That those people, they would call themselves the Ashki Anishinaabe, or the new people. And those people, when they arrived, they would remember who they were. They would remember who they were. They would remember who they were in this universe. And in that, they would be faced with two choices. One choice, or one mikada, one road, was a road that was well-worn, but it was scorched. It was a scorched path. The second path was not well-worn, and it was green. And it would be our choice as Anishinaabe people upon which path to embark. And that's what those prophets said to us a really, 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 really long time ago. And I'm pretty sure that we are told that that's where we are now. These people that have two choices ahead of us, two paths. In my humble assessment, that's pretty much where America is. Got the ability to do the right thing, got the technology to do the right thing, lacking some political will. And a lot of, not just ambivalence, but I would say self-medication. Whether it's a third of America that's on some kind of prescription drug or alcohol or too much TV or shopping, I don't know, frankly. So the question is how we move. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and sustainability from the perspective that I am hoping that I can articulate to y'all. This is painting, as you see. It's an acrylic painting that's on my wall at home, but it's this guy from Red Lake. His name is Jonathan Thunder. And in a lot of ways, this is where we are in my community. This is old guy's name is Nagani Benes, or Leading Bird. That's his picture. And he's from my community, and he's looking out his window, and that's what he sees, some wind turbines. And so I'm going to talk to you about that, but it is about how you have these teachings that are thousands of years old that teach you this minobamadasimum, this way to live. Oma came here on this land, and how do you bring that forward? So that's, now I'm going to attempt to use the PowerPoint here. There we go. Ta-da. This I show you because I like to show it, but it teaches, it has in its essence some Anishinaabe teachings that I think have a lot to do with how we're going to survive. How many of you have seen this kind of art before? So this is an acrylic painting by Ray Thomas. He's passed away. But this is Anishinaabe art. It's obviously adapted. It was traditionally something that would be on birch bark or pictograph, maybe up in the Boundary Waters or someplace where there's a nice cliff upon which to draw. Our people did a lot of that in the old days, but it refers to some teachings that I think are basic tenets of sustainability. The essential one, which you can kind of see in here, is there's these lines that connect the beings. Those are spirit lines, as they're called. Showing this teaching of Indinaway Maganatuk, that we are all related, that we are all related. Whether we are, you and I are all related, which I know bummed out some of the white supremacists quite a bit. We're like 99.9% the same, right? Pretty much. We're all pretty much the same. But we're also, in our teachings, related. In our teachings, we say that we are related to those who have fins or wings or hooves or even roots. We refer to them as our relatives. It's a teaching that is imparted in this. Also, there's a teaching of that which is around us is animate. In this society, in our traditional society, even a lot of things are animate nouns. Anishinaabe-Moan, our language, is a kind of a complex language of about 8,000 verbs, which I always say means that we're people that get a lot of stuff done. But 8,000 verbs, But in that, our nouns, a lot of them are animate. So even the word asin is a word for stone. That's an animate noun in our language, Anishinaabe-Moan, which means it's alive, has spirit, has standing unto itself. Which I think of a lot as I reflect on how we relate and how we're going to hang out for another 1,000 years, frankly. In a worldview that recognizes the natural world as having standing, having spirit, is different than a world which commodifies. Puts a price tag on, says beneficial use, and allocates it and over-allocates it. Those are some of our essential teachings. We have a teaching that the Creator's law is the highest law, higher than the laws made by nations, states, or municipalities. I think about that a lot, because in our teachings, we know we're pretty small in the big picture of the world. Humans are the last ones to arrive, and we're pretty much dependent on the rest of the natural world. That's what our teachings, impart to us. And we know that, so the idea that we would make laws that supersede that, which is around us, whether they're genetic engineering or the allocation of contaminants according to who's in political power, and the changing of recommended daily allowances of whether it's, radiation or PCBs, baffling construct, really. We believe that the Creator's law is the highest law. And we have a teaching of intergenerational responsibility, 7th generation from now. Considering that in each deliberation one should consider the impact upon the 7th generation from now. It's a very essential Indigenous teaching. Essential to sustainability. That they haven't arrived, they count on us to make good decisions. And a long time ago I was given a lecture in some room like this, and this guy in the back, he said, "That's really radical." I just said, "No, that's really, really conservative, actually." What is radical is changing ecosystems and putting too much CO2 in the air and changing biospheres so you can keep your corporate profits. That's radical. Entirely different worldviews. So I give you this art, but the other reason I like to show this art is, as you may have gathered from my introduction, I was an undergraduate at Harvard. And when I was an undergraduate at Harvard, if you wanted to study the art from Europe, you went to the Fine Arts department. If you wanted to study the art from Native America, you went to anthropology. That is basically how Indigenous people are valued in education. Marginalized, very rarely are Indigenous knowledge systems valued the same as those from Europe. Really important to consider, because I know that this is a institution with a lot of different degrees in it, but it is important to recognize that not all knowledge systems come from Europe. And in fact, there's not a lot of sustainability experience in the knowledge systems that are often taught in these universities. So that's just a little bit why I like to show that art. This is your problem. This is what the scorched earth looks like. I just came back from I laughed because I don't usually do this, but I broke my already rigorous schedule and trying to stay home, and I took to Minneapolis and Boulder with the 350.org organization to do the math tour. alarming. I don't know if any of you have been following this, but you should look it up on the web. And the New York Times piece that went out yesterday or the day before is the single largest email piece in the country right now. Basically, we've combusted ourselves pretty close to the edge of oblivion. I think you know this. And this is what it looks like. This is actually a Navajo plant on the Navajo Reservation in the southwestern United States, to the extent that you can call it a Navajo plant. 5 coal-fired power plants, 4 coal strip mines on that reservation. This is what the face of climate destabilization looks like. And there's no such thing as clean coal. It's an oxymoron, just to pass it on in case you thought there was. This is what happens. This is where we are in temperatures, and I did notice you also do not have snow, right? This is what happens when the temperature hits the ice. You know this. I'm not going to spend too much time on the state of climate change. What I'm going to talk about is 3 basic issues: climate change, peak oil, and food security. And then I'm going to tell you what we're doing about it. So I'm going to bum you out for a little bit, and then we're going to get better. Okay. This is what climate change looks like. We don't see the face of it as much as you see that, except for Sandy was pretty graphic, I'd say. Did you notice that in the election process and in the campaign that climate change was not an issue? Did you notice that? It was like they got that one handled up. Really not an issue at all. But then that Sandy thing hit, and I thought, oh geez, geez, thought you guys could slide on that one. Huh? This is an Alaska Native community called Kiwalina. It is falling into the ocean. $40 million to move it. I'm not sure who's paying for that. Estimated impact, and there's a lot of communities that look like this. I've had a lot of privilege in my life. I, travel around and I live in my own community, but this last year, a couple years ago, I was in the South Pacific, and I met a lot of people. I was actually in Bougainville, and these guys were from Christmas Island, and they had moved to Bougainville, trying to find a place to live because their island was underwater. Tuvalu, another Pacific island nation, looking for a new country. These are largely indigenous communities in the Pacific that have no land anymore. And this is basically what Alaska Native villages look like. Estimated price tag of climate change-related disasters in 8 years, which is 2 presidents away, 20% of GDP. Not clear who's paying for that. Not clear which county has that in their plan, their budget, tribe, you know what I'm saying? The reality is that we are a country and we have become people who are largely very short-term thinking. Obviously, we used to move from 7th generation to now we are people who think about semesters or quarterly profits, election years, right? And what happens frequently is you talk about these issues with even a tribe. I talked about my tribe up in northern Minnesota, and I remember the first time I present, they thought I was like a banshee, of course. I was like, we really need a renewable energy plan. And I showed some of these pictures, and the look on the tribal politician's face on my reservation, priceless. Pretty much could have been any politician. The look was pretty much, that's not happening while I'm in office, right? Which is really what's going on in most of their brains. Not happening while I'm in, but someone will actually be here when stuff looks like this. This is what happens, 30% rise in CO2 in acid in the ocean in the North Pacific. This is your ocean on acid. Basically, to keep things from totally going insane, having a reasonable chance of not collapsing ecosystems by keeping the temperature increase in the CO2 levels at about 2 degrees, which is what most countries have agreed to. We have a reasonable level of keeping it at 2 degrees. There's only a certain amount of CO2 we can combust. And a reasonable level, according to Bill McKibben, is 4 out of 5 chance. So I'm just saying that because 4 out of 5 is like not great if you're playing like Russian roulette. You know what I mean? which is kind of what we're doing with the environment, if you got that one. So 4 out of 5 is like not great, but it's probably the best shot we got. I'm not having like totally insane things going on, right? We can only combust about 575 gigatons of carbon. The amount that is on the books of the fossil fuels industry is 2,795 gigatons of carbon. That's what they're calling their assets. Coal, oil leases. You understand what I'm saying? This is the problem we're dealing with. They've got, my math is not great, but that, you guys are math people. It's like 5 times more than we can, right? That's what they have. And they are calling that an asset. I'm thinking that's a liability. And the question is just because you have it, can you combust it? And so that level of wealth and assets is what we're challenging. It needs to be challenged. This is what happens when you're an addict. This is global fossil fuels production. This is the issue of peak oil. This is where we are. We bumped it up with fabulous ideas like fracking, right? This is what happens. This is what happens when you bump it up. Single largest industrial project in the history of the world. Tar sands. Good portion of the oil in Minnesota. I think 80% is coming from the tar sands in Minnesota. I don't know what Wisconsin's is. Anybody got a? Probably pretty high, right? This is the stuff they're trying to stuff into the pipeline that the people are fighting. For good reason. If they can't get it to market. I mean, the irony is that they don't have new coal plants in the United States, but they're still trying to now ship it out to China. So if you don't have it here, it's kind of like the thing with PCBs and DDT. If you can't sell it here, why should you be able to sell it someplace else, right? Because it turns out it's still one big atmosphere. So if you burn it in Montana, or you burn it in China, does it really make a difference? No. It still goes up there. So this is, and this is what I was listening to. Josh Fox, I think is his name. He just did this movie called Gaslands. Refers to this as extreme energy. It's a really interesting construct. Like we used to just do kind of generally nasty stuff to feed our addiction. Is this fair? You understand what I'm saying? We used to do things, and then we started doing things like really going deep for oil. That's where you got like the deep water horizon, right? We started going like 20,000 feet down. Much higher risk, extreme energy, right? When the easily recoverable assets are either, held in places where people said no, which is, no actually should mean no in some places, right? Or held and you can't get them, then you start doing really extreme stuff, extreme energy. So you put in really deep wells in the ocean. You drill in places like estuaries, right? You take off an area, the soil, an area the size of Florida in the tar sands. Extreme. Or you do this. This is what the United States of fracking looks like. That's a lot. That's really a lot of land. Really highly ecologically dangerous. So the problem that we face is, we are China did exceed us in CO2, but we per capita got them all beat. Right? And we are highly addicted to energy, all of us. I'm a junkie myself. I mean, we just gotta own it, And people like panic if they, although we in the North we're a little hardier, I have to admit, I have interns that come to my house. I have this internship program. I remember this one from LA, that the power went out because we had a lightning storm. This happens up here too, right? Yeah. The power goes out, and so we're like chill. This young man is like, I'm going to town. I was like, why are you going to town? Because I want to do stuff. It was like 10 at night. I was like, go to sleep. I was like, no, but I was trying to watch my show. I said, well, the power's out. And there's probably a reason that the power's out, and I'm sure the power will come on tomorrow and you'll be okay. But like the whole idea that driving to town, which where I live is, town's a 4-letter word. It's like 38 miles, right? So, you know, town, I mean, there might be something that, like a tree on the road between you and town. You know, but this young man was like so intent. You know, the power's out, I gotta go to town. I was like, you know, of course I prevailed in my motherly way. I was like, go to sleep, honey, just go to sleep. The power will be on in a couple of days, or maybe just tomorrow when you wake up, you'll be okay. But you know, such a high level of addiction, right? And that's how we are. If you can't get your cell phone charged, or you can't get gas in you, you know. So the problem with being an addict is that we do a lot of bad stuff and hang out with dealers. You know, which kind of is why your national election results were brought to you by Exxon and Clean Coal, right? I mean, basically, a lot of power. So from kind of, you know, the question is, I mean, I'm going to show you how we're looking to deal with it. But this is extreme energy. This is the economic impact of the addiction. Single largest transfer of wealth in the history of the world. Fabulous. Fabulous. My son says when I say that, I sound like a gay man. Fabulous. I said, good. Anyway. But, I mean, really, really not so smart. We spend, you know, I'm an economist. I don't know if you know this about me, but I suppose you can tell at this point in my geeky presentation. But anyway, having said that, so the US spends about 1/5 of its money on energy. You guys know this? And what's going to happen? It's already happening now. Price of fuel goes up, right? Increases the amount, destabilizes your community and your economy. Also destabilizes your price of food, right? And tribes spend about 1/4 of the money on energy. My reservation's like LCO. You know, town is a 4-letter word, right? It's far. Nobody has a Prius on the whole darn reservation. It's like, forget that, right? And everybody's like living in these BIA or, you know, these houses which are not particularly energy efficient, right? I mean, some of us got enough straw bales around the outside of them to warm them up a bit, right? Or trailers. About 1/3 of our people live in trailers, right? And you're all, you know, I mean, some of us are still on wood, but my tribe, in its infinite wisdom about 10 years ago, no, 15 years ago, gave everyone a propane stove. I was like, that was really smart. So now we're totally transferring all our wealth. Because you can't, nobody owns any dinosaurs on our reservation. That's a snapshot. You know, we studied my reservation, but it's a snapshot of a rural community, right? Increasingly, fuel poverty, increasingly destabilized. The third issue is this issue of food. Average meal travels 1,400 miles from farmer to table. Right. You guys imagine how fun I am to go eat with? Like, totally no fun. My kids are like, although I have to laugh, I will confess this publicly, but anyway, one time my daughter picks me up at the airport because I flew in from someplace and her baby's in the car and her like 5-year-old grandson, and she says, I want to go get some fries at McDonald's. I said, oh. She says, well, Mom, and I thought about, okay, so it turns out that like half of my reservation is grows French fries for McDonald's. So I was like, well, it's kind of local, right? We did grow them, they toxified that portion of our reservation, and it is a little local, okay? So, you know, but it's like, I mean, the reality is that we are shipping stuff around that we shouldn't be shipping around. We spend an immense amount of money, about 1/4 of our CO2 and about 1/4 of our energy stuck in this food system, right? And so, you know, them Kiwis, kiss them goodbye, you know? I'm having trouble with the avocado. I might need some counseling on that one. You know, but there's this stuff. And then one of my nieces, I go over to her house one day and she's got this, she's like vegetarian and so politically correct. She's got like this like coconut, chia, goji berry thing going on with like soy almond milk. And she's like, wow, look at this. This is like full of this, you know, gives me like the rundown. Sasha, the rundown on this whole thing. And then I was thinking, she says, you know, she's like all gleaming, and I'm like, wow, CO2 footprint of that one must be pretty high, honey. I mean, like, who wants to be the one who gets the last goji berry out of the Himalayas? That seems wrong, you know? They're awfully good for you, but I don't want to be, like, karmically responsible for that last goji berry. You know, I'm sure that the Tibetans get them, you know? All right, so what am I saying in this ramble? I'm saying that's not sustainable. That's what I'm saying, you know? You can look at it any way. We can talk about the worldwide global economy and the worldwide global market. It requires a lot of gas. It requires an immense amount of gas. It requires, it's all lathered in gas from the beginning to the end in its packaging, right? And, you know, lovely to be able to get all that food, but, you know, really, if we want to be the people that hang around another 1,000 years, we're going to probably have to change some of that. We have to let it go. You know? So, that's what it looks like. Now, this is the happy part. You guys ready for the happy part? You guys get all bummed out now? So, I have been working in my community for about 30 years. 1981, I got out of college. Went back to New York, back east to school again, because tribal politics was exhausting. And then I returned. And so I do two things. I work in my community. I direct this project called the White Earth Land Recovery Project, which is since '89, a very small, we're going to go with, we're really financially poor, but full of great ideas and intellectual capital, and we do cool stuff. 89 though, I don't know if you guys have any idea how grassroots reservation-based nonprofits, it's kind of a very rare breed. You know, the nonprofit sector in this country is a little larger, but this is it. You know, we're the largest reservation-based nonprofit in Minnesota, and we're still hanging in there. So we buy land, got about 1,500 acres now, in which we grow corn, have wild rice processing facilities, and you're going to see some of our other cool stuff. But our commitment is to this: how you are going to hang out for another 1,000 years. Our commitment is to Jumisawabin Damin, or it's an Ojibwe phrase. It means something like positive window shopping for your future. Like, who's in charge of that? You know what I'm saying? Is your future going to be, you know, underwritten by, how do you call them, Koch brothers or whatever? You know, brought to you by them and Perrier or whatever. You know, who's going to bring you the future? Or Enbridge? Brought to you by Enbridge and Walmart? Probably not. Probably don't want theirs. So the question is how you decide that you are the people that are going to make something that's different. So I've been at this for about 30 years, my whole adult life, pretty much. Yeah, that would be my whole adult life, actually. And in that, you know, we asked these questions, we looked around, and we hoped other people would take care of things for us. We hoped we'd get a little justice. That'd be nice. No. So we said, well, we could, you know, complain, get some ulcers, be victims, or let's just do it. Try to make a difference, right? So we put our minds and our hard work together, and we started this organization. So I worked there, and then I worked nationally for this foundation called Honor the Earth, which produced this really fabulous piece of literature that I don't want to bring home, which works nationally on these issues of sustainability. So what are we looking at here? This is my cool corn projects. We decided a long time ago that we would start working on growing corn. Well, let me correct this. Let me say that my father, who passed away a long time ago in 1992, he used to tell me, Winona, you're a really smart young woman, but I don't want to hear your philosophy if you can't grow corn. Isn't that an interesting thing to say to a young woman? I was like, You know, but I wasn't so smart because it took me about 15 years to grow corn after that. No, I started growing around 99. But we have this project, and this is what I know, is I know that 8,000 varieties of corn were developed in the Americas. And the Ojibwe from this area and further north were the northernmost corn growers in the world. We push corn 100 miles north of Winnipeg. Our varieties are these hominy or flint corn varieties and flour corn varieties. They have twice the protein and half the calories of market corn. Much higher in any kind of vitamin that you would want. Interesting, huh? Because it turns out that in the process of industrializing corn and genetically engineering it and hybridizing it, they lost the magic. And the same thing is true with just about every other vegetable. And so we decided that instead of saying, you know, things are not looking good, we would try to restore our food systems. So that's what we're working on. Jonesy Miller is actually from Menominee. And he's proudly displaying our Bear Island flint corn, which I got about this much from a seed, a corn geneticist actually at Iowa State. And got fields of it now. It's my most resilient variety. Grows about this tall, has pretty large ears, is drought resistant and frost resistant. And when big winds came through northern Minnesota a couple years ago, Monsanto's Roundup Ready corn tipped over, but my corn stood. I'm not sure, you know, I can call it climate change resilient, but I'm trying to figure out how to adapt agricultural systems so that we can grow them when you got a year like this one. We had 40% loss in the corn crop in Minnesota, but I didn't lose any corn. I grew 2 varieties. I grew this Pink Lady, which is in the middle. It's a magenta colored flower corn. It's magenta colored. And I grew a Manitoba White Flint, which came from about 100 miles north of Winnipeg. And so what we're working on is this indigenous seed library, because actually corn has a story about where it came from, because corn is something that exemplifies the relationship between people and their relatives that have roots, and that corn did not exist except for humans. It didn't exist in the wild. I had to spend a lot of time figuring out how to create 8,000 varieties, and they're adapted to different micro-ecosystems. So this is a great corn. This one in the middle is this Pink Lady. People say, why do you grow that? I said, because it's pretty. Really, honestly. They're like, how come? I said, it's magenta colored corn. I said, I like it. It's like, how come you don't go blue corn? I said, grow your own blue corn. I'm the executive director and I want pink corn. You know, that's what you get to do when you're the boss. You get to grow pink corn if you want pink corn. But everybody likes it because it's just like so stunning, you know? Although this one old guy, really, really cool old guy, I get to meet a lot of, I'm like, people laugh at me because I'm like kind of, someone said I was a stalker because I go like track down these old corn varieties, these old guy farmers. And they're like, oh, here she comes, that old lady, no. I mean, you see me, you guys hung out with me for 45 minutes or something. I went and I crashed the Northern Plains Sustainable Agriculture Association meeting. You got any idea what those guys look like? They do not look like me. They're all like Norwegian, Icelandic, German farmers, right? And there's me with my, actually Aurora Conley was there with me. And 2 little Indian boys who are like now 12, right? Frightening crash, right? You cannot blend. They're the not blending people. And they're like, bam, you know, but then they figured out who I was and we're all cool, but they're like, what are you here for? I'm like, I gotta find this one guy, he's got the Manitoba White Flint, you know? So I go track down this guy, you know, and everybody always laughs at me because that's the way I am. And they're like, I heard he's got that, you know, when I talk to him, I trade him wild rice for seed, you know? So we're good. But anyway, I find this one old guy out in Connecticut. I hear about him. His name is Whit Davis, and he is growing this corn. His ancestor was this guy named John Stanton. Remember in your history book, the guy who, John Stanton from Stonington, Connecticut, who was friends with the Pequots. And when the Pequots were, a lot of them were massacred by those Puritans, those really rotten Puritans. Some of them were saved by this guy, John Stanton, who told them what was happening, and they fled to the swamp near Mystic. And so Uncas became his friend, and Uncas gave him corn to grow. And so for 300 plus years on the same farm, he's been growing Uncas's corn. Is that cool or what? So I'm gonna grow that corn this year. I tracked that guy down in his story, and he showed me the desk where Uncas wrote his will, and it was very touching. But that's the kind of guy I like. Like, I like cool people who do cool stuff and hang in there despite everything, you know? But he talked to that corn for all those years. He's so funny. He said, yeah, we just grow up, and we grow up for the Indians. And then every year we go, me and my girlfriend, that's what he said, he's like 94. Me and my girlfriend, we go make Johnny cakes and serve them over at the Peapod Powwow. Isn't that, you know, it's like, oh, you're so cool. Whit Davis, very cool old guy. But that's, you know, I like those people. But so, that's what we grow for those two varieties. But this third corn, really cool story, Pawnee Eagle corn. I don't grow this because this is Pawnee corn, which is from Nebraska. You know, although looking at the climate, I could grow up probably a couple of years if we keep up with this. Which is, someone said South Dakota moved this way. It's like, yeah, pretty close. Anyway, Pawnee Eagle corn, really cool looking corn. Now, this teaching I give you. No, the Pawnees, Deb Echohawk told me I could tell this story, so I tell you this story. I heard about this, and then I had to go track her down. Right? It's not surprising. Anyway, so long time ago, in Wayne, really long time ago, the Pawnees, like the Anishinaabe, we descended from heaven, from up above, a different plane. That's how we came. That's how we were told, right? And in their case, when they came down, the man was wrapped in a buffalo hide, and the woman was wrapped in a corn husk. That's what you call cosmogenealogy, if you're really an anthropologist-like. Which means that that's how deep the relationship is. So this isn't something you buy at the store or you genetically engineer. It is something that has a spiritual center to it. Yeah? And so they come down, and so that always a part of who they are those two things as Pawnee people. Originally they were Arikaras, and they lived up on the upper Missouri River, which is the place that is like the golden crescent of corn in the north. It is the most amazing area, and they grew their corn varieties there, and then they split off and they head down to Nebraska. Some of those people, they became the Pawnees. They're the same people though. And they lived down there, they brought their corn with them, and they adapted it to live there, and they did well. And then the settlers came, and they actually got along pretty well with the settlers. That's how they describe it. They said we traded, we became, she said, Deb Echohawk, she says we were kind of like AAA. If they had a broken wagon wheel, they come see us. If their horse was lame, they come see us. You know, they just worked it out. You know, people can work things out given the right circumstances, you know, and the right dynamics. And so we worked it out pretty good, but then the federal government came. And the federal government forced the removal. Pawnees to Oklahoma, 3 separate generations of them moved. There's 3 separate removals, forced removals. Many of the people perish. They end up in Oklahoma, and when they end up in Oklahoma, they grieved the loss of their people. They grieved the loss of their land, and then they grieved the loss of their crops because they would not grow. And so they tried year after year after year, but the soil was not right in Oklahoma. And so their most sacred crops dwindled down to hardly any. And then about 8 years ago, this woman named Ronnie O'Brien, who runs the Archway Museum in Kearney, Nebraska, called the Pawnee tribe and said, I'd like to grow some of your old seeds out. And the Pawnees said, we don't have very many. And then she said, well, you let me know. And so they put her in touch with Deb Echohawk, who said, and went to the elders, Pawnee Elders Committee. And she went and talked to all the elders, and they deliberated long and hard, and they said, you know, we cannot grow them, maybe they can. And so they sent the seeds back to their homeland, and the descendants of the original settlers grew those seeds, and they flourished. They flourished. And what Deb said is that the seeds remembered the land they came from. She said. And so they've been working and growing them all. This year, Honor the Earth, my national foundation that I work for, we're able to support the Pawnee youth going up to live and work with the farmers and grow their varieties in Kearney, Nebraska. And 2 years ago, they had Welcome Home Pawnee Days in Kearney, Nebraska. And 150 Pawnees came up on a bus from Oklahoma, and 8,000 people came out to greet them. And that relationship has continued. So I tell you that story because that is some of the most beautiful corn I've ever seen, that eagle corn. But also that is about how corn is something that did not exist except for us. It is about relationship. And in this case, it is also about redemption. That's how somebody made something right. And so that is a little bit about things change. This is my friend Frank Kutka. This is what I'm telling you, the corn is short. When I first tried to grow it, I thought it was a failure. I was like, oh, it's so short. And then I seen Frank Kutka, and he said, this is how it grows, Winona. And I still have great corn, and it's just short. It doesn't spend its time getting very fancy and tall. And it's really good in a big wind to have short corn. So, this is a really cool squash. This one here, Arikra squash, has, I forgot, like 57% of the DRV for vitamin D or something in it. Half the calories of market squash, very high in amino acids. I grew that a few years ago. I'm going to try to grow it again. This year I grew some, I'm embarrassed to say, it kind of got with some other squash. Didn't practice safe sex, so I was like, dang you old squash. But this other one here, this is Gete Okosman. This came from an archaeological dig near Green Bay. And I don't know who was digging. I actually have to get the full story. Frank Elegria told me about it from Menominee. And Luis Salas also gave me these seeds. I didn't grow them for several years because I had all this trauma around me. My house burned and stuff, so you had to be kind of zen to grow cool things. That's what I don't know if you can get that, but you know. So this, you'll see why I didn't grow it. So this is last year's crop. There was, in this archaeological dig, there was a clay ball about this big. They shake that ball, there's something in it, they crack it open, squash seeds. Carbon date 800 years old. Yes. That cool or what? That's a squash. So the reason I tell you that is a couple things. One, we got that big seed vault over in Norway. I think that's a really great idea, but I think the clay ball might be a better idea. So use clay ball. Apparently, you know, because it wicked it out. I don't know the whole thing, but some like materials engineer will tell me that or something. You know what I'm saying? Is that it worked out. Should have community seed banking as well as whatever. Clay ball seemed to work really well. Okay, I went down and I saw Wes Jackson's $1 million seed facility. He's a prairie farmer guy, a prairie restoration guy in Salina, Kansas, and I saw that. I said, I think I'm going to stick to a clay ball. This squash, it grows about this long. Great squash. I baby it a little bit. Everybody makes fun of me. It's like baby my squash, but they said finally people, and we serve it for our ceremonies. We have a farm to school program that we serve some of it in our farm to school program for the kids, but we serve it mostly for our ceremonial and our feasts. And so people say, what's the, what do you call that squash? And I said, Gete Okosman. I said, white guys get to name squash all the time, so I'm going to name the squash. And so I named the squash Gete Okosman, which means really cool old squash. So that's what we're doing. And so in this case, what I'm trying to impart to you here is you got to fight climate change. You got to fight these big companies. I don't know if you got that yet. You know, do you guys get that pretty much? Because they don't get to do that stuff just because they got it doesn't mean they get to do it. Just because they pretend they hold the assets doesn't mean that they get to do this. So I spent a lot of time fighting bad coal plants and, you know, fighting the tar sands, and I spent most of my life fighting coal strip mines and such. And, you know, I'm ready. I'll keep going on that one. But at the same time, you have to change the economy. And it's not just growing local food, it's also what you grow. And in the case of our communities, our Ojibwe communities, my reservation, a third of my people have diabetes. And so I could grow a lot of stuff, but I best grow the things that are for us. And I best grow the stuff that's the highest in nutrition. And so that's what we're doing. And then the second thing we're doing is, well, the many other things we're doing. This is our solar install. And our work on renewable energy. So in order to decouple ourselves from being the largest energy consumers per capita that we are, we need to do a few things. The first thing you need to do, which I don't think you need too much of a lecture on, is conserve. I don't know if I have the chart in this slideshow, I kind of forgot where it was, but we waste about 57% of the power between point of origin and point of consumption. Inefficient production systems at our power plants, long lines, and inefficient in the building systems, right? People say you cannot replace the present demand with renewables. I'm sure you've heard that, right? Two things you should say is, first, why would you want to? Will be number one. Why would you want to feed such an inefficient system? What if we were the people that were efficient, like really radical countries like Germany, right? Produced over half its power from solar part of this summer. As Bill McKibben says, Wagnerian German. I mean, you know, it's like a foggy country, right? You know what I'm saying? It's like Wisconsin or something, right? Get smart and get solar. So this is my house. This is my solar panel in front of my house. This is our tribal renewable energy training program, installing the solar panel. Solar photovoltaic, it's 2.2 kilowatts, it's not that big. But in my case, because I live on a lake in the trees, that's where I installed it, is by the lake. I had to go battle the county, which was, you know, that's how my life is. You cannot do anything without somebody saying, no, you can't do that. So then you gotta go figure it out. You know, so you guys hung out with me for a while. You know, I'm pretty reasonable. I dressed up in I call it my going to the financial aid office outfit. It's like really prim looking, and you're like, I'm a really, really nice lady. I'm not that crazy Indian woman who lives on white earth that you're thinking I am, really. So I go down there, and of course, it's the county commissioners planning board, right? And these guys, and so I'm asking for a zoning variance because I'm trying to put a solar panel up next to a lake. And so that's a violation of the lakeshore ordinance, right? Which I'm sure you have here, right? And I'm like, I want the solar panel by the lake because that's where the solar energy is. It's not in the woods. It's by the lake, right? And so they say, no, you cannot have it. I said, no, I'm trying to explain to them. They said, no, it's an eyesore. I said, that is a subjective term. You know, I'm looking at essentially 5 Norwegian guys who are in their 70s, right? Looking at me like, oh, no, no. So this went on for a while, and they said no. And so then I went back and I stuck out my lower lip for a while, and for about 24 hours, and then I had the epiphany that many Native people have, which is they had no jurisdiction. Because I happened to be a tribal member who lived in the middle of the White Earth Reservation on a lake which was in their county. So I went to my tribe and I said, what about that solar panel? They said, perfect. So my tribe exercised jurisdiction over the county. The county is probably still mad about that. But the irony was, it's like, you know, I said, you know, the big giant yellow boathouse 3 houses down is an eyesore. You know what I'm saying? It's a subjective term, right? And if you're going to have solar, you might have to have it by the lake in some of these places. And you know, it's all subjective. But this is us putting that up. This is our wind turbine. I'm a big proponent of community-scaled wind. Why am I doing this scale? Basically, the wind industry in this country is divided into 2 categories. One is really small, like micro wind usually, to a household size, and then most of it is large. Utility scaled, owned by utilities. I'm really interested in wind owned by people and by communities, and I'm interested in a scale that's going to both matter in terms of climate change and matter in terms of who controls your power. Because the reality is that if you're in a really addictive economy that is controlled by large corporations, you're not in a very good negotiating position on your future, frankly. And so this is a Danish wind turbine. In fact, the Danes are the beginning of most wind turbines. Smart country. And they're not that different. I was doing some studying, and I think they're not that different than reservations in terms of that they're kind of remote northern islands, a lot of them. This is the island of Lowland. This is a lowland wind turbine that nobody cares about. You know, your economy's going down and you're not in anyone's eyesight. You know, you're not like a big fancy country. So these guys decided, this is from Lowland, and there was a bunch of blacksmiths. No one had graduated from MIT with an engineering degree. These are like blacksmiths who had made boats before. And they saw that things were not going well, and they decided to make their own turbine. And so they made these turbines that they could fix, which is, that is the point, is you don't want to put up technology that you can't actually fix. That's what appropriate technology is. And that is really, you know, for indigenous communities, that's really about self-determination. But for all of us that are in this millennium, in this country, the fact that we have relinquished most things to corporations is a little problematic if you're trying to get control of your destiny. Frankly, I don't know how y'all are, but most of us are pretty smart, get these advanced degrees, but we can't do anything. Like my dad said, can you grow corn? You know what I'm saying? Can you fix anything? Can you grow anything? Can you heat your house? Can you know what I'm saying? We outsource it. We outsource everything. And so in the end, at some point, being a little bit more self-reliant, so you have a local economy that is at a level of technology that can be fixed locally, is a really, really important strategy for sustainability. So this is my grandson, Guy Wade in Buckanaga. I just want you to all note that he is outside of the yellow tape. This is a wind turbine being put up, a lowland wind turbine. The guy who's putting it up, who is like hanging on the top, is a vet. He's a vet. Why am I telling you that? Who has the highest rate of living veterans in this country? Got any idea? The Native community. Highest rate of enlistment, highest rate of living veterans. And what do we have a lot of in this country? Vets. When you have a huge military, you end up inevitably with a lot of veterans. And a lot of those vets have a skill set that is transferable to the green economy. If you can fix a Humvee in the middle of the desert with a whatever, you could probably fix a wind turbine. Plus, he probably got enough insanity to climb an 82-foot tower, which is what this guy did, And this guy, I had met him, and my mother, of course, is who figured it out. But she's like, I had this long litany. I said, well, what were you in? He gave this long list of places. Well, I was in Nicaragua, and then I was in like Panama, and then I was in Sierra Leone, I was in Iran. I was like, oh, those are all great places, yeah. So I said, what did you do? He said, I was in demolitions. So what did you do? I blew up communications towers, weapons facilities, dams, bridges. I said, do you have a degree to blow things up, or do you just blow things up? He said, I have a degree in engineering. I said, can you build anything or just blow things up? He said, no, I can build things. I said, there you go. Build that. So that is how we got that tower up with local native engineering. I didn't import anybody, I just talked a vet into doing it. And this is your big Ojibwe word of the day. Can you guys say this? Inashke? Inashke. That means ta-da! This is what it looks like when it's up. So that's what I'm working on. And I'm doing this, and my tribe, and the thing about working on this in a rural community now, I know Wisconsin is, way, you guys are a pretty cool bunch, except for that Scott Walker. Basically. You guys are like pretty cool. And I always am very proud when I come to Wisconsin, and I'm, I can't say I'm a part-time resident of Wisconsin, but I go to Madeline Island a lot, being our Ojibwe homeland. So having said that, in order to do things like this, you need better policy. I don't know what your net metering law is like here. Terrible. So draconian like Minnesota's, yeah. Net metering is it's really hard to get something this size on the grid. They punish you the whole way. So you need some legislation that supports locally produced power. Because it turns out that if you want to do this, Dane's the world's leader. 87% of their power is owned by communities or individual farmers. 56% is owned by individuals. If you want to control power, you actually have to control power. That's not utility scale, that's community scale. So if you do this kind of work, if you transfer a quarter of your CO2 emissions out of agriculture, and instead of taking the carbon out, leave it in the soil. If you move from the most inefficient energy economy in the world with a mass transit system that's an embarrassment to Bulgaria, at some point you might get to a place where we have something that's going to hang around another 1,000 years. But it takes, this is a school that has a lot of skilled technical people in it. You're smart. Use your skills for something. Don't squander them. Because this is a level of skill that I don't have. You don't want me torquing bolts on wind turbines. I can garden, I can farm, I can drive horses, but you don't want me torquing bolts. But that's the kind of skills that we need. And if you do that, that's how you have a shot and not combusting our mother. And then you build a set of policies that reflect that. So this is my very last slide here. This is my family, or some semblance of my family. There's a couple Navajos on there, so everyone should have a couple Navajos on their boat at all times. Those two little boys are mine, my son and my nephew, and then one blonde intern, Molly. She totally rocks. Anyway, so this is our white earth travel flag that's on Leech Lake. I wish I could say it's a biodiesel houseboat, but not quite. I'm working on that one. Anyway, why am I showing you this picture? Because in the privilege that I have wandered a lot of places, and I also have the privilege of living in my own community. And I know that happiness, money can't buy you love or votes unless you're Michelle Bachmann. But, you know, essentially, on a worldwide scale, we're not the happiest people in the world, even if we spend the most money. The quality of life and happiness is predicated more on things like relationships. If you, in the surveys that are done, I went to a couple of happy countries. That sounds funny. I went to Vanuatu a couple years ago. And Vanuatu for many years was considered the happiest country in the world. Island in the middle of the Pacific, Melanesian. I mean, not a bad gate to start with, right? They're way down there, kind of out of sight for everybody. So they have a lot of coconut and fish, which is a good start, right? You know? But these guys, they're all Melanesians. They go down there and take a look at them. They have like perfect teeth, perfect skin. Nobody is obese, and they're just like pretty good looking bunch, right? 80% of their economy is local. Even their beer, for you in Wisconsin. Their beer, they had a brewery. You know, I'd sample, not particularly fancy beer, but you know, the thing that was cool about them is they just refilled their bottles. They didn't do that stupid added materials economy dysfunction of crushing them and redoing them, right? For some kind of fake sanitation thing, right? I mean, you understand what I'm saying, right? I'm like, how we got into this whole thing, it's like the whole thing with hemp. I mean, how we got away from being able to grow things to a bunch of petroleum byproducts is, you know, how you build really dysfunctional industry that you then have to support with a massive amount of electricity. So these guys didn't do that. Yeah, they stayed pretty local. They made a lot of choices, but in their studies, they have urban and rural areas, and everybody kind of goes back and forth, but in their studies, people value the most pretty much clean water, access to land, customary land, good social relations, that there was some security in your old age, that you had some health care, some education, right? These are like basic indicators of quality of life. So I did this here. I was presenting at this World Economics Conference in New Zealand a couple years ago, and Vanuatu was there with Costa Rica, who just unseated them a few years ago. It's the happiest country in the world. Got to hang out with Bhutan too. They have the Gross National Happiness Index. They don't even have GNP. You understand what I'm saying? These guys are like Gross National Happiness Index. These are happy people. I was like hanging around with them all. Anyway, so I was hanging between Vanuatu and Costa Rica, and I said, Vanuatu was unseated by Costa Rica, and I said to Costa Rica, I said to Vanuatu, what happened? How'd you lose your crown? And they said, faulty data. So they're really busy scrambling to get their data systems right so they can take Costa Rica and the happiest country award, you know? So why am I telling you this? Because we became people who, you know, believe that a lot of things that we should not believe. You can't buy your way of life at a mall. You can't have more security by putting more people in prison, you know? And you cannot buy so much happiness with so many prescription drugs. I just say that because I'm fond of that, because there's quite a few out there I figured out. Didn't even know the street value of half the drugs. But how you transform that is you get outside of your box. You know, one of my favorite countries in the world right now is Bolivia. You know, Evo Morales, indigenous president of that country, just enshrined in the Constitution the rights of Mother Earth. enshrined in the Bolivian Constitution. That's a little bit different than enshrining that corporations are natural persons under the law, which is what we did, right? In the US. The rights of Mother Earth enshrined in the Constitution. That is kind of at the top layer, all the way down to net metering and local food policies. You know? So the changes, if we want to be the people that are sustainable and are going to live here for another 1,000 years, Oma Aking here on this land, require us kind of getting out of our box. The box is suffocating, and the box is combusting, frankly. But other people who don't make Fox News are got up. And they said, this is how we're going to live, and this is how we're going to live for thousands of years if we do it right. But they need us to do the same thing. So thank you for your time. I'd be happy to take a few questions if you like, if you wish.
Please use the microphone in the middle aisle for your questions so we can get them on the tape.
Did you get a good picture of my Starbucks cup? Slow recycle, that was on tea now.
Well, thank you for being here. I wanted you to expand a bit upon your tour in Minneapolis and Boulder with Bill McKibben on the issue of climate change. If you could perhaps discuss how that may be relevant to an institution like UW-Stout, given the divestment campaign that was associated with that.
Thank you. Oh, wait, I'm going back here. Okay. So interestingly enough, a little historic fact is that Bill McKibben and I were classmates, which is a really funny thing. I don't know if you know Bill McKibben, The End of Nature is what he wrote when he was like 27 or 28 years old. He's been working on climate change for many years. And so it was very interesting because he was a classmate of mine during the divestment campaign at Harvard on at that time on South Africa. And so what 350.org is proposing is an incremental approach for divestment of fossil fuels, and asking large institutions like UW-Stout and the university systems and universities to start with, to begin the process of divesting, to hold a rogue industry accountable. The reality is that any industry that wants to, feels that it is okay to change the whole chemical balance of the earth in order to make profits is a rogue industry. And the only way to challenge them, in our experience, is to, we need to do all things on this, and we need to do lawsuits, and we need to continue our legislative processes. But in the experience that we had in fighting the apartheid system in South Africa, we found that divestment worked. And so based on that strategy, in the case of South Africa, initially, as many of you know, until the early 90s, South Africa was a country that had essentially legalized slavery. In order to bring that country to change, struggle occurred on the inside, and many of us know the story of Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu, but at the same time, college campuses is who launched the divestment campaign. And so, over the course of a decade, about 155 college campuses divested of stock, as did then corporation or pension fund after pension fund, church after church, challenging the assets of the country of South Africa to come in accordance with basic human rights. And so they're just launching this campaign now. And do you know what the website is? Well, it's just 350.org, right?
Yeah, it's math.350.org.
math.350.org, and then there's a fossil fuels fact sheet. I asked them to ship them. I said, I'm going to stop, but they didn't get them here in time.
I have a few copies.
Perfect. So you were at the show were you at the show in Minneapolis?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
Full disclosure.
Full disclosure. Yeah. You want to add anything else to it? But the point is that, so what Bill remembered, because it was very funny, because Bill was a reporter for the Crimson And I was one of the students that was campaigning on the divestment campaign. So I was like, aren't you glad you had something to write about, Bill? You know, because it was really hard being a, you know, it's like being a college journalist and your college paper and like how much you know. I was like, we were demonstrating, we, you know, took over the administration building, which I cannot advocate here. But, you know, we, you know, petitioned and we pressured and we called meetings and we had a lot of vigils and we pushed Harvard. Harvard is not the easiest one, but you know, the university systems in I'm sure that Wisconsin probably divested. Does anybody remember that? I know that the California systems divested and colleges after colleges, and Unity College and Amherst College, and I think one other college just announced that they were divesting. And the divestment approach, for those of you who know people who have stock portfolios, or if you have stock portfolios, is incremental. I mean, there's an assumption because it's such an insidious and interrelated set of corporations, and many, you know, people have a pension fund that, you know, you don't have all those pieces together. But to begin the process, to start pressuring them in combined with, you know, continued push, because the reality is that these guys are spending hundreds of millions of dollars in finding new fossil fuel sources. And just the tar sands itself is $100 billion in US investment right now, $100 billion. Now what if we use that instead to get efficient? Or what if you use that instead to put up renewables? You know, that is the irony, is it's not only that they invest in destroying the environment. The irony is that the opportunity is lost or postponed to do the right thing. And what we need is the right thing. So, do you have something else? There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another question in the back.
Thank you. I just want to make one small point about the wind turbines. They were originally, a lot of that developed by the United States government when they hired Boeing to do a lot of research, and that stuff sat until the Danes bought a lot of the plants and machinery and took over the whole industry. So some of that was U.S. money many years ago when I was young. The second question is, I'm given the very cynical political atmosphere we have in this country and in this state, I'm curious if you'd be willing to stick your neck out and say the Native American communities could maybe lead this country back to maybe where we were after they were decimated. Thank you.
You know, I had the pleasure of watching Rachel Maddow on election night. Did any of you watch Rachel Maddow lean forward? Yeah. Do you guys know Rachel Maddow? How many of you watched? You know, that was a great night, wasn't it? You know, because I was sitting there and like, I know, I mean, I got a pretty good sense of what's going on. I was like, oh, the voting machines, they're gonna have the voting machines rigged. But you know, people stood in line to vote for 7 hours in some places, and people just voted. And in Wisconsin, I think that your governor's trying to change the voting laws because it didn't work out in the election, right? I was like, there you go, just play fair. You know, you lost, you guys lost. You know, and you should come up with a new game because that one's not popular. You know, but so, I mean, I was encouraged by this last election, except for that Michelle Bachmann thing. I haven't figured out. She spent 12 times more than her opponent, though. I mean, so money can buy you an election. In some cases, 12 times more than her opponent is how Michelle Bachmann. I mean, I'm sure, you know, whatever. But I just think we need to keep, you know, I'm someone that, as you have gathered, I mean, I believe you got to look at all levels. And we have to keep at it, you know, including the election process. And, you know, but I believe ultimately that a lot of this really has to do with how we behave and how we recover some control of our communities at a local level, which requires, you know, really integrated strategies, though.